demonstrated through her strategic engagement and initiatives, underscores the importance in communication, in fostering goodwill, and shaping positive future for diasporic African Americans in their homeland. Nora's career spans traditional partnerships between educational institutions and governments across borders. She served in the U.S. Middle East Peace Team, directed African Affairs at the National Security Council, and contributed significantly as the U.S. Consul General in Florence, Italy. Her leadership extends to founding SAPER and International Biotech Research Center in Tuscany and directing State Department's Advanced Arabic Institute. Quoting one of Nora's favorite writers, "Hard work is a prison sentence only if it does not have meaning." I'd like to welcome my friend and someone who's been a great, supporter of United Women of the Horn, which is my sister here at Babel, and my other sister, Sanajim Jimo, who will be moderating and speaking today as well. I'd like to welcome up Nora Dempsey. I think the stage is that way. Oh. Sorry about that.
Thanks. So good morning. As Hafsa said, my name is Nora Dempsey, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Diaspora Engagement at the State Department. When this conference was initially planned, it was a two-day conference, and I was on day 2 as a panelist. And now, suddenly, I'm like the first speaker in a lineup that includes a president, congresswomen, senators, and the Assistant Secretary of State. I mean, wow. Right after I thought, wow, I thought, moi? Like, me? And then I thought, that's proof. It's proof that the diaspora matter. I'm the first ever in this State Department to have a position like mine. It was created by the Assistant Secretary and by the White House because they understood that the diaspora matter. 2 years ago, they created this position because they knew that the diaspora is key. Really, you all are key to a peaceful future for the diaspora in the United States and for the Horn of Africa. My job, my whole job, is to listen, to connect, and to empower. The U.S. government, we have our responsibilities and our role, but the diaspora has a separate role and a separate power. We want you to use that power, and that's why we're here joining you today. Before we get to the big names now, and the big speakers, the important folks, I want to thank Mohammed Ismail. I want to thank the Horn of Africa community, Abdi Mohamud, and I want to thank my great women who make up the United Women of the Horn and who've done so much work for this today, Hafsa Mohammed, Mabel Gebremedin, and Sanajim Jimo. Thank you so much for coming.
Good morning. My name is Faisal Roble, and believe it or not, I have spent in the United States more than my own country or anywhere else, about 40 years. I was one of the first refugees sponsored by the United States to come here. And I recall a U.S. congressman coming to me in Los Angeles while I was working at 7-Eleven waiting for UCLA's admission. And he asked me, how do I like? And I told him, I can see making a good living in this country. 40 years after, Somalis have thousands of diaspora members, 37 elected officials, businessmen and women, and so are Ethiopians. So I think America is the home that we found without planning. I'm presenting President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, but before I do that, I really like, honestly, while the Undersecretary is here, she may not be here with us in the afternoon, to congratulate and recognize two people that have been working closely in the last few years on the Horn of Africa issue. Mike Hammer, Ambassador Mike Hammer, and Nora Dempsey. Very accessible, very genuine, very open to outreach. And I'm not saying this lightly, I've seen this in practical. Nora is the most accessible official I have dealt in that 40 years since I've been in the United States. So thank you very much. It is my distinguished honor this morning to present to you President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who is also a friend to me. President Hassan is the 10th president of the Somali federal government since 1960, 10 presidents so far. He is lucky to be the 8th president as well as the 10th president. He is the only president who has been elected or occupied that office twice in the last, since Somalia became independent. Most of you may not know, but Somalia was created out of the union of the former British Somaliland and Italian Somaliland. And Somalia is really in the center of post-World War geographic remapping of Africa. I will not go into that, but I just want to say that Somalia had a lot of challenges, but at the same time, opportunities. It's the only country in Africa until recently in the 1960s when a president lost his office through election that he walked away, packed his books, and left the office to the next occupant. Somalia was alone in that. And I think the US, the diaspora, the African continent need to pay attention to Somalia, not what they see today, but where Somalia has been and where it's going. As a president, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud has been an activist in the past, a community organizer, an educator, and today a statesman. So he ran through the entire gamut. Without further ado, let me bring him up as the 10th president again, and he will present us with his challenges and opportunities that he faces today. Of course, many challenges, but at the same time, many opportunities, because Somalia, possessing 3,000 plus coastal line, is not only important for the West and for the United States of America from a strategic point of view, but for its neighbors, including Ethiopia, which is the second largest and second most populous after Nigeria. And with that, I think I'm very happy that the Undersecretary will be here to listen to the President's speech while presenting the challenges and opportunities we have, and thank you very much.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, honorable dignitaries, and esteemed participants, it is an honor and privilege to join you virtually for this important conference that you have. I extend my heartfelt appreciation to the leadership of Minnesota Institute of Horn of Africa Studies for organizing this important event. Your dedication to bringing together East Africa's diaspora, their friends and leaders, is commendable and greatly appreciated. Your commitment to engaging in this discussion is a testament to our collective pursuit of progress and prosperity for the region and beyond. The vision of Somalia. We are here today to discuss the interconnectedness of our communities, and in that spirit, I'm glad to share with you the vision we hold for Somalia. A Somalia at peace with itself and with its neighbors and the world at large. This vision is a cornerstone of our efforts to rebuild our nation, and it guides our everyday action as we work together a future of stability and prosperity for the benefit of the whole region. Somalia's peace and stability is intrinsically linked to the peace and stability of the entire region. In this interconnected and globalized world, our futures are intertwined as a region. Regarding regional integration and economic cooperation, our regional integration is a key component of our strategy for progress. By enhancing our partnership, we've joined the East African community. We are positioning Somalia to benefit from the economic cooperation and shared development. This integration is essential for fostering collective growth and ensuring the stability of our region. Regarding the recent debt relief and completion of the process of the debt relief and good governance, a significant milestone in this journey has been the process of debt relief. This achievement is not just a financial reprieve, it represents Somalia's unwavering resolve to restore normalcy and good governance. It's a powerful symbol of our determination to overcome past challenges and to build a nation founded on principles of accountability and transparency. Somalia has made a progress in these areas. Regarding the global engagement, Somalia's UN non-permanent seat, our commitment to global engagement is further exemplified by our recent securing of a non-permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. While Somalia used to be the topic of discussion for the past few decades, we are now part of the discussions to address global security challenges. This achievement reflects our dedication to contributing constructively to international peace and security. It provides us with a platform to advocate for the interests of our region and to play an active role in the global decision-making. Somalia is committed to fostering peaceful collaboration with all our neighbors. We seek partnership that respects the sovereignty, unity, and the territorial integrity of every country. It is through such respectful and cooperative relationship that we can ensure a stable and prosperous Horn of Africa. However, under any circumstances, Somalia will not allow land grabbing and breach of its statehood. A neighbor cannot pose existential threat to one's fundamental rights and then claim that they are protecting you. In our effort to ensure peace within our borders, we've made significant strides in downgrading the threat posed by Al-Shabaab. The imminent drawdown of the African Union Transition Mission in Somalia signifies our growing capability to maintain security and order by transitioning full security responsibility to the Somali security forces. Our focus remains on achieving a peaceful and secure Somalia, where our people can live free from fear and terrorist violence. This does not mean that we are also going to compromise the stability, the security of our neighbors. Our neighbors have sacrificed for Somalia. And it is time Somalia will sacrifice the security and stability of its neighbors. Regarding the contribution of the diaspora community, the contribution of our diaspora community have been invaluable The diaspora are ambassadors of our countries, acting as bridges. They represent the best of both worlds, sharing their expertise, knowledge, and cultural richness among us. The Somali diaspora plays a crucial role in Somalia's state-building process. They serve in our parliament, in our cabinet, and hold technocratic positions which are very important for our state building. Their involvement is a testament to their commitment to our nation's development and their desire to see Somalia thrive. And the Somali people are so committed to receive and welcome and give an important role to play by their diaspora communities. Across the world, including the United States, and particularly in Minnesota, the East Africa diaspora is an asset to all of us. Their know-how, skills transfer, and significant remittance have been instrumental in driving our development and rebuilding effort as a country, as a countries, and as a region. For this, we extend our deepest gratitude to the United States, the state of Minnesota, and the East Africa diaspora. Your ability to connect our region and your unwavering support to continue to inspire us all wherever we are. Together, let us continue to forge partnership that uplift our nations and create a legacy of peace, prosperity, and unity. I thank you all.
Thank you to the President of Somalia, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, for joining us today virtually and making that very important statement at this very timely summit. Our next guest is a unique and dynamic leader in this state. Abdi Wahab Mohamud, Assistant Commissioner of the Office of New Americans within Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, DEED, is the highest immigrant nominee in the state. Abdi Wahab brings a wealth of experience and brings dedication in his role focusing on empowering and supporting Minnesota's diverse communities. Throughout his career, Abdi Wahab has been a tireless advocate for inclusivity and economic empowerment throughout the state and in this country. His leadership at the Office of New Americans exemplifies a commitment to fostering unity, integration, entrepreneurship, and equitable access to opportunities for all people of Minnesota and in the U.S. Under his guidance, initiatives have been launched to enhance workforce development, promote cultural understanding, and strengthen partnerships between communities and state agencies. Abdi Wahab's collaborative approach and deep-rooted understanding of the challenges facing immigrant populations have made him a respected voice in our community and in this state. His efforts have not only enriched the lives of newcomers, but have also contributed significantly to the economic vitality and cultural fabric of this wonderful state. Please join me in welcoming Abdi Wahab Mohamud, whose leadership continues to make a positive impact in the lives of so many.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Abdi Wahab Mohamud. I have the honor of serving as an assistant commissioner within the Department of Employment and Economic Development. I see Naomi here, so I pretty much do what you do at the State Department here as the state. But it's such an honor to be here today. I walked into the room and I've seen so many familiar faces. And I thought to myself, before you think of a diaspora, we expect a lot from the diaspora communities. We expect them to be contributing to the economic vitality of the state they live in, the city they live in, and also to participate in the governance and relationship back home with the federal government. So there's so much to expect. from the diaspora community. Then I thought, who is a diaspora community, and what are the stories behind people who we call diaspora today, going back 100 years. These are people who either by choice came to this beautiful country or had to pack their whole life in a suitcase and leave everyone they knew and come here by choice, but also leaving behind a lot of the families and friends they had. Either way, when they come here, when we come here, you're faced with so many challenges. Language barrier, transportation, credential work. Some people bring in so much skills that they cannot even use the next day. You've heard about the story of a doctor who is doing a manual labor job. So there's so many difficulties, and the first point of contact is the local communities, the neighbors, the municipalities, the state. And what are we doing as a state here in Minnesota to help or support the diaspora community that we expect so much from? And I was thinking about, since we started this office, and this is me giving a little bit of a background of the office we have, the Office of New Americans. A couple of years back, we had so many issues that the community was advocating for. Starting with previous government's anti-immigrant laws and some of the local laws that the community was advocating for, and of course some other issues. And there was that central coordinating entity that the community needed to support the work that the community wants to do in the state of Minnesota. And that was the idea of the Office of New Americans was born, an office that will represent all immigrants, regardless of their background, their identity, religion, all immigrants in the state of Minnesota. And to give you a perspective, we have about 480-something thousand people who live here, foreign-born in the state, so close to 500,000 folks that call Minnesota home, and that's about 8% of the population here. And as you look into the data, disintegrated data, we have huge communities from Southeast Asia, the bigger chunk of the communities from East Africa, and that brings us to what we're doing here today. What is the East African community in the state of Minnesota? We hear so much about, home to the largest East African community in the nation. However, the stories are behind why the East African community chose here. We are at this state, an open state that welcomes, and that's the key to a community to find home in anywhere. The issue of welcoming. We have had, even since we have this office, we have more discussions on what welcoming means. There are great efforts by the federal government welcoming America, but we've joined the city of Minneapolis and St. Paul, who also have offices of New Americans, to move the conversation from welcoming to belonging. If you want to read the Journey to Belonging, but the idea is that if you're welcoming me to your house, it's still your house. If I am immigrating here for good, that means I need to feel belong. I belong in that house. So we're moving the conversation from welcoming to belonging. So that's why you have the Journey to Belonging. The Chamber of Commerce did, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce did a report on the importance of the communities and welcoming here in Minnesota, and that's a beautiful report that I would invite everyone to read. But it shows the contribution, the economic contribution of the community here in the state. What have we done? I know we don't have much time. What have we done as a state to support the diaspora communities? We have created this office, and the Office of New Americans is now by statute. I have had the honor of leading this office from an executive order to now having it as a state law that clearly defines the duties of this office. And the one role that really stands out is the coordination effort. We have about 17 state agencies at the state, going from revenue, agriculture, public safety, education, and each of those agencies have certain programs for the immigrant and refugee communities. When it comes to education, we have programs for taking your kids to school. When it comes to agriculture, we have the Emerging Farmers Program. When it comes to health, human services, we have so many programs at each department that all trickle down to the community. And what this office does is coordinate those efforts. And of course, we have a diaspora, we have a interdepartment agency council that sits and meets. We are lucky to be supported by the lieutenant governor, the governor himself through the budget and the proposals that have been done last session. But to just touch on a few things that have been touching the lives of the immigrants. For example, we passed the driver license for all bill that last session passed that now allows people who could not get driver license to now apply for driver license and get two jobs. It's already impacted the number of employers outside the metro areas, and now people are free to drive to that places. Things like the Office for Enterprise Translation. We have all agencies that now they can access their translation and interpretation needs free of charge. We have had advocated for other initiatives that really touch the lives of the community. But whatever we do here locally, we're also joining other states to do the work federally. So we have an Office of New American State Network. About 21 states belong to that network. We convene in DC once a year. We do a lot of work with the new Task for New Americans, the New Americans Task Force, the Department of Human Service, and the White House's Office for Intergovernmental Affairs. We do want to see this drive. We want to support other states that are doing that. Just last year, we have brought on board North Dakota that now has an Office for New Americans, and the latest, states to join the network. Maine, for example, the governor has just launched some of the most, immigrant-friendly new policies. So these are diaspora communities in other states that are now joining forces to have such an amazing office that will coordinate immigrant and refugee resources in states, which is an amazing work that is continuing. I invite all of you to support your communities. I've seen so many community members because that is how we do the work. We do it in two ways. We get the information from the community and we pass it along to policymakers. We get the policies and the state resources and pass it out to the community. So that is the vital role that we play, and we cannot do that without community organizations, the CDFIs, the community-led organizations that are doing the workforce, the health initiatives, the public safety initiatives. So it's great to see all of you in this room, and we'll continue to champion the work that we do here. I could continue to talk about this for a while, but I want to make sure that we give time to all the amazing speakers. Thank you so much, Minhas, for hosting us today. I feel I'm home. And thank you so much, Assistant Secretary, for joining us today, and the other amazing, dignitaries that are attending here today. I know later on we expect Mayor Frey to attend. He will talk a lot about the Office of New Americans that the City of Minneapolis has been doing. And so it's an honor to be here today, and thank you so much. If I forgot anything, I would leave my contacts with Mohamud Ismail, and I'll be accessible if anyone wants to ask questions. Thank you.
And now we have a special segment. Welcome to the special segment of the East African Summit, featuring a fireside chat between Assistant Secretary of State Molly Fee and Mabel Gebremendin of the Women of the Horn. Molly Fee, a distinguished career member of the Senior Foreign Services with the rank of Minister Counselor, was sworn in as the United States Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs on September 30th, 2021. Prior to this role, she served as the Deputy Special Representative for Afghanistan Reconciliation from 2015 to 2017, and she was the U.S. Ambassador to South Sudan, demonstrating her deep commitment to fostering peace and stability in the region. Ambassador Fee has an extensive diplomatic career. She was the Deputy Chief of Missions at the U.S. Embassy in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and served as the Chief of Staff in the Office of the Special Envoy for Sudan and South Sudan. Additionally, she has held roles as the Acting Assistant Secretary for International Organizational Affairs and as a Deputy Security Council Coordinator at the United States Mission to the United Nations, where she managed UN engagements in Africa and the Middle East. Earlier in her career, Malifi has contributed significantly to the National Security Council as a director for Iraq and as a senior civilian representative for the Coalition Provisional Authority to Mason Province, Iraq. She began her diplomatic journey at the U.S. Embassy in Amman, Jordan, and subsequently served in Cairo, Egypt, and Kuwait City, Kuwait, where her proficiency in Arabic was of immense use. A native of Chicago, Illinois, Ambassador Fee is an alumni of the Indiana University and holds a master's degree from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. Her exemplary service has been recognized with numerous awards, including the Distinguished Honor Award and the Robert C. Fraser Memorial Award for Conflict Resolution and Peacemaking, the Baker Wilkins Award for Outstanding Deputy Chief of Mission, the Secretary of Defense Meritorious Civilian Service Award, and the Order of the British Empire Award, and a Presidential Rank Award. Moderating this engagement discussion is Mabel Gebremedin, a respected advocate and human rights activist known for her tireless work in supporting marginalized communities and addressing social injustices. As a co-founder of both the United Women of the Horn and the Tigray Action Committee, Mabel brings a wealth of experience in advocacy, women's rights, and humanitarian effort. In this fireside chat, they will explore critical issues affecting East Africa today. And without further ado, let us welcome Assistant Secretary of State and Mabel Gebremedin.
Now? Jeez. Now? Okay. Thank you, Nora. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Nora. We are really excited here to be here today, to be with you. It's a big deal. This is not something small, and I'm a little nervous having everybody look at me. So I'll be looking this way. Okay. I thought we would start with an overview of the current situation happening in East Africa and the continent overall.
Okay, I'm checking my mic. Nora?
Yeah? Yes. Okay.
So first, Mabel, I would like to say thank you and to say how honored and excited I am to be here. Happy to be in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. Happy to be at this beautiful Norway house. And filled with admiration for the Minnesota Institute for the Horn and for the United Women for the Horn. And Mabel, think about when you first started your group and now where you are. So this is the story of African immigrants in the United States having a vision and turning it into reality. So congratulations to you and to all of you here for not only building lives for your families, your communities, your states as Americans, but also contributing to peace and security in your homeland. And as Nora talked about, we've been trying to innovate and to expand our engagement with the diaspora community because we recognize the special role you play and that you are, as has been said, an asset, not only to the United States, not only to the state of Minnesota, but also to your home countries. So, the situation in the Horn, well, you all know better than I do, it's not great. And it's a very difficult period, and I think we have to pause and say, it's a very difficult period globally. Globally, we're seeing a recession in democratic governance and a rise in authoritarianism. And it's a challenge in Africa and in the Horn, but also across the globe. And so we all need to continue to work hard to address those problems and to find a negotiated path, when possible, to conflict. In the Horn, the most acute crisis right now is in Sudan, and I think everyone knows that. And my deep fear, honestly, is that if we cannot find a way to pressure the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to find a way to a ceasefire, that Sudan could break apart the way Somalia has broken apart and suffer from years of conflict. So we all need to work on that issue. And Sudan, of course, like Somalia, shares a border or coastline on the Red Sea. In Ethiopia, such an important country historically, such a partner to many countries in the region, historically a leader, not only in the region and in the continent. There continue to be challenges. The guns were silenced in Tigray, and that's very positive, but we continue to need to see more work done for reconciliation there and to manage the challenges that now are in other parts, other regions of Ethiopia, where there are insurgencies and a often unproductive government response to those insurgencies. You all know well the rich history of Ethiopia, the rich diversity, which led, I think, those who overthrew the Derg to develop a system of ethnic federalism. It's not working now, and you will need to find a way forward. I took note of Faisal Roble's really beautiful statement earlier when he opened to think about where you have been and where you all want to go. And I think that's what this conversation is here today. How can we help all of you achieve the peace and prosperity that you're hoping for? And in Somalia, as the president said, there have been so many positive developments recently. Somalia will now be a member of the Security Council. That's an incredible honor, and we will welcome them on the council to help promote peace and security. The president has done really good work in managing your debt situation. He continues to engage with the federal member states, and we would encourage that engagement to continue to help solidify Somalia's stability. And there have been some important successes in the campaign against al-Shabaab. We also need to mention, regrettably, that ISIS is present in Somalia, so the terrorism fight continues. And it's gotten worse lately because there seem to be some contacts between al-Shabaab and the Houthis. As everyone knows, the Houthis are disrupting commercial traffic in the Red Sea. And so far, efforts of a multinational force to address that problem have not been as successful as we would like to see. We are proud of our support for Somalia. One of the diplomatic options we developed in recent years is we established what we call a quartet, which are the major partners of Somalia who support the military fight. So it includes the United States, the United Kingdom, Turkey, the Emirates, and Qatar. And so we try and coordinate our engagement so that it's complementary and reinforcing rather than inadvertently competitive to support, again, the SNA fight against al-Shabaab and ISIS. Somalia has also benefited from the support of its neighbors, who are the troop contributing countries to the African mission, which has had several names, as all of you know. And so now we're looking to plan a post-ATMOS, that's the current African Union UN-supported mission in Somalia. We all hold to the goal that the president outlined, that Somalia can stand on its own feet and not need this assistance from its neighbors, but given the difficulties in the current situation, we're not quite there yet. So we need to work together to develop a successor mission to continue that engagement, so that for once and for all, you can put to bed the conflict in Somalia and devote, I think, what most governments want to devote their time and attention to, which is helping communities flourish, helping find economic prosperity and other government services. You're fortunate in the region to have a strong partner in Kenya. Kenya had gone through many challenges, but is now moving forward very positively in a number of sectors, including technology, including health, as well as governance. I think we saw the peaceful transfer of power 2 years ago. We were delighted to welcome President William Ruto to Washington last month, where he was a guest of President Biden. That was the first African head of state who was invited for a state visit since 2008. That's too much time. I think that had elapsed. But it was a great opportunity to discuss with him how the U.S. partnership in Kenya and Kenya's role in the region. You also have a great leader in Djibouti, where they face many challenges, including they're vulnerable to the current challenge from the Houthis, and we're trying to work collaboratively with our partners in Djibouti. But the president and the foreign minister have been active partners in trying to support I think, regional diplomacy to address some of these challenges. So that's a little bit of the overview, how I see it, how we see it. But I want to say that I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you, because you have a different perspective, a different set of inputs, and your guidance to me will help make the United States a stronger partner in promoting peace and security in the Horn. Thanks.
That's a good answer. It was more of an overview than I expected. We are going to have a lot of time for some questions from the audience, but I'm going to start with a question just to get it going. And there was a country that you didn't mention when you were speaking of during the overview, and so I'll ask a question about that. Eritrea's role in the Horn of Africa often intersects with regional conflicts and dynamics. That's better. What is the U.S.'s approach towards Eritrea's counterproductive or undemocratic involvement in the region?
Well, I didn't mention Eritrea, and it's in part because we right now don't have much engagement with Eritrea. As everyone knows, in the terrible war in Tigray, all the forces involved there, according to U.S. legal assessment, were guilty of war crimes. We announced an atrocity determination that determined that Eritrean forces, Ethiopian forces, Tigrayan forces, and militant groups such as Fano from Amhara had all committed war crimes in that fight. We established sanctions against some Eritrean entities because of their conduct in that war. So also given the closed and repressive nature of the Eritrean government, we have not had a good relationship. We respect that Eritrea is in an important location, that Eritrea could be an important partner and a positive force if the government chose to take steps in that direction, and we would welcome steps in that direction. But it is, you know well, the uneasy history between Eritrea and Ethiopia, particularly Tigray. There have been disputes about the border. We would like to encourage a peaceful settlement of the border mediation. We would like to see all Eritrean troops withdraw from Ethiopia. And again, we would welcome a productive engagement with Eritrea in the region.
Are there any questions just yet, or oh, yep, immediately. We have a question here. Yes, sir, you're welcome to.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Steve Dunlap. I am Eritrean. I was wondering why it wasn't mentioned. I believe in the value of welcoming strangers, so I applaud everyone for all that you're doing. On the issue of Eritrea, however, where are we going with this? Especially, for example, I don't really see a presence here with the Eritrean community, and the diaspora has been so wonderful in assisting Somalia achieve all these goals that it's doing. It's an example. But where is the Eritrean community here in terms of that effort? I know that there's some hostility between the government of Eritrea and its expatriates. And I'll just wait for your answer.
Hello? Okay, I can answer that part of the question, and then if there are more questions. Try that again. I'll speak up too. I can answer that question specifically about the diaspora. Thank you. And when United of the Women, WH hosts our events, we make sure to reach out to Eritrean women specifically and ask them to join in because we feel that it's very important that women from the Horn of Africa are represented in everything that we do, but specifically Eritrean women because there's very little that we can hear from the diaspora community. So we're trying, we reach out, and we want everybody to be involved in this, not just Ethiopian, Tigrayan, it doesn't matter. We want the entire Horn represented, but thank you for asking that question. Is there a specific question for the Assistant
Yes.
Secretary? Sure.
Hey, my name is Aziz with the Ogaden Community USA. As you can see, there's a lot of flyers that are talking about the Ogaden region that are suffering unknown disease that created a company China called Police GCL. And we've been complaining since 2014. Also, we already, they now U.S. State Department about the issue. So we're asking why the U.S. State Department can go about their own investigation since the Ethiopia are denial what's going on in the region.
Okay, let me just make sure that I understood that question. You are asking about something specifically that's happening within the region that you'd like the United States to pay a little bit more attention to?
Yes.
Okay, and so is that something that the administration is thinking of, specific region issues when it comes to health and disease in the Somali region of Ethiopia? That wasn't the question, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. It's about the oil and the Chinese connection. And so the Chinese government is sending, please.
I think the question is there is a Chinese oil companies who are doing a oil exploration in the Ogaden region. So there is a lot of chemicals in the region. So livestock, camels, goats, sheep, even human beings are suffering for the last 10, 15 years. And I think the United States was aware of that. So we'd like to know, what this, how the United States will respond to that.
Thank you. I was not aware of this specific issue in Ethiopia, but I am aware generally of problematic Chinese practices in developing and exploiting African resources, where we see Chinese companies operate without regard for environmental standards or for human rights standards, for example, with child labor. So those are issues that are most properly addressed by the host government. The host government should be in discussion with any Chinese companies, whether private sector or parastatals, who engage in the extraction of African resources. So we're interested in helping African governments manage those engagements. So for example, we have technical expertise we can offer in helping a government review a contract to make sure the business contract protects those interests that I've described. So that's something we're happy and willing to do. Thanks.
Thank you for that question. We're going to take a question from here.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to challenge the assumption that you mentioned about the failure of ethnic federalism in Ethiopia. I don't know where that assumption or conclusion has come from. Because we say that and we believe strictly that ethnic federalism have not been implemented fully. And there are two conflicting views about what is going on as far as the ethnic conflicts in Ethiopia are concerned now. We say, for example, mainly my assumption is that many of the ethnic conflicts are being incited by the government plus by other parties which say that this ethnic who would like to put the blame on ethnic federalism and the current constitution. And no research has shown that. No, I have not seen your assumption being substantiated by any research. In fact, there is huge media outcry from one political corner, and that is the unionist group which say the current constitution is not working, ethnic federalism is not working. But that's not the case. We say that ethnic federalism is, for us, for the southern people, it's a guarantee. In fact, it has been instrumental in bringing the country not to this chaos, but it has been a glue to make the country united. So I would not agree to the opinion, and I don't know whether this is substantiated by research or not. I'm sorry to say about that, but that's absolutely unacceptable.
Thank you very much for sharing your view and allowing me to clarify what I said. All I mentioned, and for example, first let me make very clear to everybody here, it is not my role as an American or a US government official to define a governance structure for Ethiopia. That is the role properly of Ethiopians. I was just referring to the assumption of that model, the implementation of that model following the overthrow of the Derg. And as you pointed out, there are now debates within Ethiopia, and different groups in Ethiopia have different views about whether or not that form of government was effectively implemented or whether or not it should be updated or adjusted. So I want to make very clear it is not my role to determine the form of government in Ethiopia. That is absolutely properly the role of Ethiopians. But it is clear that there was a form of government called ethnic federalism, and that now there is discussion about whether or not that form, however it was implemented, has been effective. So there are viewpoints articulated compellingly, such as yours, and I believe there are other viewpoints from other Ethiopians. I'm just trying to highlight that the issue of how to build an inclusive society that delivers services for all Ethiopians is an issue under discussion now in Ethiopia, and it will be important for its peace and stability and respect for the rich diversity of the country. Thank you for allowing me to clarify my point.
Thank you. We're going to go to the next question. I just want to make sure we're asking questions. I think we were going that way. Where were we going?
I wanted to go back
Sure.
there, then come back to Nyaza, then go up there.
So we're going a little zigzag, but we're going to get your questions in. And let's try and keep them as short as possible to make sure that everybody gets a question in.
Thank you so much. My name is Abdurrahim Mohamud. My question is, in 2018, there was a ceasefire was signed between Ethiopia and Ethiopian rebels like ONLF is one of the parties those who have signed the ceasefire. ONLF party, they have been taken their action, and you see this Ogaden community is still stable and working good. But on the side of our government, this is ceasefire and the agreement was not yet taken any action. How did the United States know about these issues up to now?
Thank you very much. The question of stability in Oromia is very important to the United States. We're engaged in conversation with the government and advocating for a negotiated solution to the challenges there, and to be listening to the views of the Oromo, and again, contributing to the discussion about how the region and the country are governed. We're also concerned about the role of insurgents in Oromia, who often attack civilians or government infrastructure and create insecurity. And then that leads sometimes to a heavy-handed response by government security forces. So the civilians are caught in the middle of this dynamic. So we continue to advocate very strongly for negotiations and a peaceful resolution to the tensions in the Oromia region.
I'm sorry, we had a hard time hearing you, and so she was, it's this one.
It's the same idea, right? It's the same challenge, where the central government, the federal government, needs to pursue with its different regions a peaceful path to addressing outstanding concerns. That military force, particularly internally, is rarely the answer. So I'm sorry that I misunderstood because I thought you said Oromia, but absolutely the Somali region, which I've had the pleasure to visit, is an important and vital part of Ethiopia. and the interests and concerns of its residents need to be respected. So what I outlined is the position of the U.S. government, that we encourage the government and Addis to work collaboratively and in negotiation with the different regions to address their concerns in a way so that there's inclusive governance that respects the rights of all.
Okay. Okay, I have the mic. Thank you for being here. It's an honor to share space with you. My question is pertaining justice and accountability in Ethiopia. Voices from different parts of the country, be it from Amhara, Oromia, or Tigray, echo the fact that there is no any sense of trust on the Ethiopian judiciary mechanism, nor on the Ethiopian government's commitment towards getting justice for the violations that occur in the country. So, despite this reality on the ground, the US government seems to be committed towards pushing and endorsing an Ethiopian transitional justice. So my question is really, could you please explain why, instead of working towards an international, independent, and credible justice and accountability mechanism that puts survivors at its corner, the US government is endorsing a federal government that is blamed of committing violations of human rights, including genocide, to lead efforts towards getting justice? The people on the ground whom I work with, and many of us work with, on day in and day out are telling us that they don't believe the Ethiopian government has the capacity nor the willingness to get justice. So why shouldn't the US government in its admirable efforts put the voices of the survivors at core and push for an international justice mechanism? And because this is not only because the federal Ethiopian government doesn't have the commitment, but also it ignores the fact that what happened mostly in Tigray is not a local matter. There is Eritrea, and if we're going to push only towards transitional mechanism led by Ethiopia, then Eritrea will walk out freely after committing gross violation of human rights, which would leave a precedent that would continue to destabilize the Horn of Africa. So my question is really to hear the logic behind supporting Ethiopia-led transitional justice while the people on the ground are saying we do not trust that is going to get us justice nor sustainable peace in the country. Thank you.
I want to thank you for raising the concerns of the victims of the violence and to express my sympathy and condolences in the first instance to what they have suffered. And it's communities on all sides who have suffered, and we agree that the best way forward for Ethiopia is to acknowledge what has transpired and to promote reconciliation. We have an office of internationally regarded lawyers. It's called the Office of Global Criminal Justice. And as you know, they have worked with the government of Ethiopia to help build a program. It doesn't surprise me that there is lack of trust or concern about government intentions, given what communities and individuals have suffered in recent years. It's a principle of international law that it is always preferable to have a local solution. So if you can find a local solution, that's the most durable and effective. So that's one of the reasons why we contributed our expertise on this matter to help in the development of the government plan. But now the question becomes, and this is the most important question, I think, will the government actually implement the plan? Because the plan as drafted could substantially contribute to addressing the questions of accountability and reconciliation. So in the first instance, we will look to see if the government moves forward on implementing that plan. And if there is not the success that we all hope for, then we can look for other solutions. But that's really what's driving our approach, in that there's a cascading, sequencing cadence in international law, which holds that, again, at the local level, that is the best way to set up a durable solution. So that's why we contributed our expertise, as did other partners. We have a group of international friends of Ethiopia with like-minded views who are also keeping an eye on this process. So I think this is a work in process, and we should stay in communication on this issue. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up with that question, and then we'll get back to the audience. When we're speaking about survivors and victims. We're specifically speaking about women. And GBV and CRSV, which is conflict-related sexual violence, we've spoken about this before, is a huge issue in East Africa. I recently had a guest essay published in the New York Times about CRSV in East Africa, and it is a huge, huge problem. What is the Bureau doing about this specific issue?
I have to tell you, this is not a Bureau-specific issue. Very sadly, this is an issue in all conflict. Women and children, as we see in ongoing conflict across the globe, are always the most vulnerable, always the greatest number of victims. So this is a problem that's being addressed internationally, globally, if you will, as well as a national level by the United States. So we have different strategies that mobilize different programs to help combat sexual violence and conflict. And we also work in the United Nations system and with our partners, particularly the UN technical agencies that provide assistance, like groups like UNICEF, for example, to see how we can ensure that their programming reaches those vulnerable victims. So it's not you're seeing it in Africa, I'm seeing it in Africa, it's terrible, but because it's a problem that's endemic to war, it's treated, if you will, at a global level.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yes, the microphone is here. Okay.
Thank you very much. I really want to thank the Undersecretary for taking time to really engage us. We rarely get this kind of opportunity. And I don't want to drop her into the quagmire of Ethiopia's internal, because most of the questions seem to be that direction. I would rather ask, as an American citizen, an issue that pertains to what she can do for us. Since the 1950s to 70, the United States spent over $20 billion on Ethiopia, particularly to move it to the democratic direction. This year, 2023, we spent over $2 billion, But if anybody looks at Ethiopia today, if I borrow that Mexican saying that say, oh, Mexico too far from God and too close to hell, I think Ethiopia today is too far from democratic culture and too close to an autocratic situation, which you mentioned. Is there a redefinition of the US policy to look at the Horn in particular, because we are in a deficit of democratization, and particularly to Ethiopia? What is really the current prevailing thinking to really arrest Ethiopia from going down the hill, which it's already? Thank you.
So when I work with my team at the State Department, I find that one of the issues that requires me to teach is the question of assistance, because we have many different flavors of assistance. So let me just clarify here just for everybody so we understand. I know you understand, but I just want to make sure it's understood. So first of all, the United States is the largest donor contributing to humanitarian assistance. For example, we provide 50% of the budget to the World Food Program. We provide humanitarian assistance without regard to governance. So in countries across the world in conflict where people are suffering, no matter what type of government it is, if there's human need, we provide assistance. And in fact, it's a big problem now globally because the United States and other traditional large donors like the European Union, our Nordic friends, we can't keep up with the need, right? There's so much going on. But I do want to reassure people that we remain committed to humanitarian assistance for Africans in need, Ethiopians in need, without regard to governance. We separately have programs of development assistance, which are primarily implemented by the U.S. Agency for International Development. And in Africa, that has been mostly health. We engage heavily in health assistance, and with also the contribution of the Centers for Disease Control. We've done the miraculous PEPFAR program, which has saved more than 25 million lives in Africa over 20 years, and has really been a landmark contribution to helping with the health of the continent and help building health systems, including in Ethiopia. So that's an example of the kind of development assistance we do. We're also very interested in agricultural productivity. We have a program called Feed the Future, which you may have heard of, and the Secretary is also now working very closely with one of the world's leading agronomists, Dr. Carrie Fowler, to help improve seed distribution, seeds in particular that are resistant to climate change, as well as looking at soils, which soils, doing mapping of soils, and as climate change affects Africa, which are better areas to grow. So these are all tools that help build healthy, prosperous societies. A third area where we're trying to increase our engagement is to promote U.S. trade and investment in Africa. So we've had an important program of trade preferences known as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA. You may have heard of it. Over 30 countries in Africa benefit from this program. It's up for reauthorization in 2025, so please urge members of Congress to support reauthorization of this program. It also probably needs to be updated because it's a 20-year-old program. In AGOA, the law says you can't provide trade preferences to a government that's engaged in serious human rights violations. So because of the challenges that Ethiopia is currently undergoing, we had to suspend the AGOA program. And in part, that breaks my heart because I know it really helps women in Ethiopia, particularly women in the textile industry. But the law is very clear. It says if there are these gross human rights violations, those trade preferences can't be extended. So that's an example of how the conduct of the government and the situation will affect our assistance. Also, many of you in this room are businessmen. Many of you know about what it's like to try and engage in an unsettled environment. So if Ethiopia remains unstable because of these challenges from insurgents and the government response, we won't see the kind of American investment that we would prefer to see in Ethiopia, because America brings great technological know-how. We bring good practices. So we're a better friend and a better partner, and we would like to be engaged. As I said at the opening, we're concerned about instability in Ethiopia because of Ethiopia's rich history and its position. It has been and has the power to be, as you noted, a great leader in the Horn. And so we have frank discussions with the leadership about those issues, and we will continue to have those discussions. I also want to shout out to the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, to Daniel Bekele, for the work that he's doing to highlight the challenges, and to encourage our partners in the government to take the steps necessary to restore Ethiopia's stability and to create the conditions for prosperity. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for coming here, and I would like to thank the organizers also. My name is Kasim Arba, and I'm here to represent the Afar community of Minnesota. Earlier, you mentioned Ethiopia. Can you guys hear me well? Okay. So there is now, as we speak, there is a conflict waging in the Ugaden and Afar region of Ethiopia between the Somali and the Afar region. And this conflict is taking place inside the Afar region. This aggression has been going on since 2017. Somali and Afar are both Muslim Sunni. We never had any issue for over 100 years. Always there was a skirmish about resources, but it had never reached this level of violence. The Afar people are suffering, not only because of the environment that is really unforgiving, but it's also because of everything that happened in Ethiopia in the last wars, the last conflict with Tigray. In Tigray, Afar suffered a lot. They suffer now in the Afar region in the middle of Samara. So my question is, you mentioned earlier that Ismail Omar Guelleh was a great leader. 99% Ismail Omar Guelleh, the president of Djibouti, you mentioned that he was a great leader. I'm sorry, I have to disagree. And 99% of Djiboutians will disagree with that also. He is behind the conflict that is taking place right now in Ethiopia between Afar and Somali. He's fueling this conflict for the last 7 years just because he wants to stay in power, and he's just fueling with money, weapons, and mercenaries. And this issue is going very far. So my question to you, since the United States have the biggest military base in Africa since 2003, what is the United States policy when it comes to the region, especially regarding the Afar people who are also maltreated, who are tortured, who are being treated as second-class citizens in Djibouti, And Ismail Omar Guelleh has destroyed all the Afro region in Djibouti, and the same issue is going now in Ethiopia. Since you guys have the embassy since the inception of Djibouti, and since 2003 you have the military, what is you guys doing to stop Ismail Omar Guelleh mingling and interfering in politics in Somalia, also in Ethiopia?
I want to thank you for raising the important concerns of the Afar region and the Afar people, and to acknowledge that, as you pointed out, they did suffer as well during the war in Tigray. And we're glad that the guns have been silenced, and it's important now to help those communities rebuild. You've talked about two sets of problems, one between the Afar and Somali peoples in Ethiopia, and also about your concerns about the Afar people in Djibouti. I'm happy to repeat what I've said before. It's important for Ethiopia to work with the different regions, with the different communities, its great diverse ethnic population, to find peaceful resolution to local and national tensions, and we will continue to advocate for that. I said President Guelleh is an experienced leader. He is an experienced leader, but we, like he, are looking forward to the upcoming election, and you will find the United States supporting a free and fair electoral process in Djibouti to refresh the governance there. He has been an important partner to us because the U.S. base has been there, but as we advocate for democracy in other countries in Africa and around the world, we will advocate for a good, strong, healthy process in Djibouti.
Thank you for that question. I do want to follow up because Djibouti is a very international country. The Horn of Africa is a geopolitically very, very important location. We are seeing China, Russia, Turkey, all of the rest of the world in there. What are your thoughts on where America stands when the rest of the world is too many hands in the cookie jar?
I'm careful to try and not think about Africa as a toy that we're going to fight over with other countries. And that's the position of Secretary Blinken. He wants Africans to have choices. And he believes that we have a value proposition, which I can discuss and advocate, as you might imagine, where we are a good partner and a good friend. But we can't do everything. And it's important for Africans to be able to engage like we engage with other countries all around the world. One of the goals of the Biden administration and Secretary Blinken is to lift Africa up to be part of the global conversation. So I think some of you are familiar with our advocacy successfully for the African Union to join South Africa in the G20. And the G20 probably needs to expand even more to include more African voices. We are strong proponents of reform of the Security Council to provide permanent African seats. Our Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, who I understand is in Minnesota this week, who doesn't even know really that I exist, but I know that she exists, and I have great admiration for her because she is working hard to reform the international financial institutions and multilateral development banks so that African interests, are properly addressed. So, for example, she's successfully advocated for Africans to have seats on the executive boards of the IMF, the World Bank, and also an important multilateral development bank known as the European, a lot of Ethiopia here, the European Development and Reconstruction Bank. She's working to try and make sure that the financial programming addresses the credit challenges of many African nations and the infrastructure needs of many African nations. And the administration is trying to work with Congress to ensure more resources are poured into different programs and facilities, they call them, of these groups so that they address the urgent needs of Africa. So these are ways in which we are trying to be a good partner to Africa and not limit other partners from engaging productively. We do have concerns, quite honestly, in particular about Russian engagement in Africa. wherever you see Russian engagement, the result is not usually happy. We see exploitation of resources, we see greater insecurity, we see greater civilian casualties, particularly in other countries also fighting terrorism, like in the Sahel. China has been a good partner to Africa in many ways, but as I discussed earlier, in other ways it has not been a good partner in terms of exploitation of resources without regard to the people and their environment. I think there's a lot of space for everyone, but it's important not to recreate the Cold War. It's important not to have a colonial attitude towards Africa. So that's what we strive to do. We're a good partner. We believe strongly that if you work with us, the outcome is usually positive. But we recognize that Africans have the right and agency to engage in other partnerships as well.
It's good to know. I do want to remind everyone we still have time for questions, but Assistant Secretary Malifi's portfolio is not just Ethiopia, it is all of Africa. And so if you have questions about anywhere else, please feel free to ask them too. Where is the microphone now? Back here, yes please. Oh, and it's a woman.
Hi, thank you so much for giving us your experience and sharing your thoughts with us on the region. My name is Saida, and I was just looking at more in depth about the Bureau of Africa Affairs, so I'm not going to ask any political questions, so mine will be very easy. One of your missions says that you're supporting Africa as African states progress towards stability, citizen responsive governance, and self-reliance. I think that, or the question I have is that, what is the Bureau doing in terms of really engaging the diaspora to be on the field with them? Because I know from experience that the diaspora are a soft power to use to create better relationships. And I say that because I've been working in Somalia for the last 5 years, and I've seen what the technocrats on the ground can do. So going there alone to do this kind of work, because we have all these responsibilities as diasporas, is not enough. What is the Bureau as an institution trying to do that, to bridge that field work for technocrats who are on the ground to help them? Or even within your teams, how are you utilizing the diaspora community, particularly in Somalia?
Before you guys answer the question, I was thinking maybe I can go around and ask everyone to ask their question, and you guys could be, make a note of it, given that we're limited on time. Is that okay? Sure. Is that okay with you guys? Okay. Remember that. Okay, I know. So yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So everybody can make it brief. I'll go like 3 people. And then.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My name is called Hamid Masheye, and hi everybody. And thank you, Ms. Molifil. I come from an area that Dr. Abiy is trying to annex. On January 1st, he announced that he will annex part of Somalia, and that's the maritime area near Djibouti. That area has a long history, and for the last seven centuries, we had war with Abyssinia, because Ethiopia was called before Abyssinia. Ethiopia, the name is the black face, and the whole continent of Africa was called Ethiopia. And Ethiopia adopted Ethiopia 120 years ago. But before it was called Abyssinia. So for the last 600 years, we had wars. So, and even during the Cold War, that area I come from was always the playground for the superpowers. The Soviets, when they intervened and when they were bringing MiGs, and before that, the F-5s, they used it to shell us, to kill us, to strafe all the towns. So the people over there are really angry. They are really angry that Ethiopia, that annexed 1/3 of the Somali territory before, is trying now to annex part of Somalia. My question is, and before that I will say that in 2006, when Ethiopia intervened to Mogadishu and in Somalia and tried to occupy, it actually occupied Mogadishu. That ignited a war, and that gave birth to the terrorist groups, Al-Shabaab. So now, the problem is, Ethiopia is doing the same, and even it's doing the worse than that. So it's killing the trust and the goodwill that was created in, between Somalia and Ethiopia for the last 30 years. So my question is, isn't it, and also, Dr. Abiy is killing the Tigrays, he's killing the Oromos, he's killing the Amharas, he's killing all the nationalities, and he's trying to bring back the Cold War again to the area. So my question is, isn't it the time to stop Dr. Abiy and sanction him directly? And you also answered the question partially, but isn't it, because it's good for the whole area, it's because he's destabilizing the whole area. He is a threat to the peace of the world. And he was given the Nobel Prize of Peace, which is really a contradiction, an oxymoron, because he's really the, they should have given him the Nobel Prize of War. So isn't it time to stop him and to sanction him directly and his cronies? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Where are we going from here? Okay, we're going to do our best to keep them short, please.
Thank you. My question actually is the base of what my colleague said. I am from Somaliland, and there will be an election in November 13, 2024. So my first part of the question is there a specific, tangible thing that the United States will contribute to that election, which is rare to happen in that region? My second question is the MOU, which he was referring to. MOU, from Somaliland perspective, we see as a development integration in East Africa. Is a concept that have to be embraced, because the future cannot be a conflict, cannot be what happened 100 years. And the example of that one is when Somaliland was developing Berbera Port, there was a lot of noises and a lot of rejections coming from Mogadishu. But now Berbera Port become one of the best ports in Africa. I think it was third in this year. So my question to you is, what is the view from the United States perspective for the MOU? Thank you.
Thank you. Are we only doing 3 questions? Okay. So the first question, you remember all 3? Okay.
Thanks. So with regard to the role of the diaspora and how to have better communication between the diaspora and the State Department, and particularly the Bureau of African Affairs, I would like to point out that I'm here today. And my physical presence is because I recognize, as the United States, the administration generally recognizes, the important role the diaspora can play. You have a special knowledge and expertise, as Nora has talked about, and we can play complementary roles in promoting peace and security in the countries of your origin. And we appointed Nora Dempsey as the first senior advisor, and she is here and a great partner, as you heard from our uncle Faisal Roble, and what an important role she's played. Have we perfected communication with the diaspora? No. So I would encourage you to help us work on that. I also want to remind folks who may not be aware that last year we established the U.S.-Africa Diaspora Council, which is comprised of 12 distinguished leaders from the diaspora, from the Black community in the United States, leaders in many fields: religion, education, business, the creative industry, sports. Those are rotating chairs because we have such a rich diaspora in the United States, so we want to be able to give others opportunity to participate. The current membership is traveling to Nigeria this summer, and we're really looking forward to their engagement in Lagos and Abuja. But this National Council, we have not yet perfected the engagement with state and city councils. So continue to work with us on this matter, but we recognize the importance of the diaspora and the importance of your expertise and contributions. So I hope that's well understood. We are all concerned about the MOU, but let me first state U.S. policy. It is not up to the United States or any other country to determine the governance structure of Somalia. That is the role of the people of Somalia and the people of Somaliland. And that's what we encourage, dialogue, as the federal government has dialogue with member states of Somalia. So when that MOU issue first came up, the United States led the effort to firmly assert what is basically the bread and butter of international relations, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Somalia. And you saw, we spoke to that, as did most other governments in Africa and in the international community. Again, those are common principles applicable all over the world as they are in the Horn. So with regard to the upcoming election, Somaliland has a respectable and admirable history of elections. Unfortunately, I hear some reports, which you may know more about, that there may be an effort to delay those elections. We don't think that would be good for Somaliland, and we would encourage the elections to go forward as scheduled. That's an important principle here and in every country in which we work in Africa. I do want to highlight that this is I think, as I said at the outset, a difficult, if not perilous moment for the Horn, right? The Houthi engagement in the Red Sea disrupts shipping. Ethiopia has a legitimate right to commercial access to the sea. That right is enshrined for all landlocked countries in international law. But it doesn't mean that there needs to be land grabbing, as the president said. We oppose that. That's why we, again, have sought over and over again to demonstrate we respect Somalia's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and we will continue to do that. But the moment is difficult, and it's important, I think, for all governments in the region, whether they be Somalia, Ethiopia, Kenya, Djibouti, who are tested by al-Shabaab. So we need to find a way to promote that continued collaborative effort with the support from your external partners, as I described earlier, with the Quartet partners. So we will continue to advocate for a resumption of a collaborative partnership with respect for, again, it's important to say a third time, sovereignty and territorial integrity. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take 3 more questions. 4 more questions.
Just want to say a very important person came into the room while I was talking. So let's welcome Senator Klobuchar.
I didn't even see her. Thank you, Senator.
So I'm sure she's very busy. So Mabel, I'm happy to adjust our timing to make sure she has an opportunity to speak.
I'm sorry, can I do an ETA? How are we on time? Do we have enough time for questions?
Thank you, Assistant Secretary. We really appreciate the U.S. government's effort to stabilize the Horn of Africa and the whole African continent. And especially we appreciate your efforts assigning, the special envoys to negotiate the peace between Ethiopian federal government and the TPLF. So the cessation of hostility agreement has been signed almost 2 years ago. So how do you just evaluate its implementation? There are some positive progresses and still challenges ahead. What do your position? And if it is successful, what is the plan or your take just to extend that model into other conflicts in Ethiopia, as well as even to extend it to Sudan?
Thank you very much for raising the importance of not neglecting implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement. I hope we've learned our lesson from other conflicts where you put down the guns, but then people walk away and they don't address the fundamental challenges that caused the guns to be lifted in the first place. So Ambassador Mike Hammer, who is a wonderful colleague and friend, and I have been working very hard with the African Union and other international partners to make sure that we don't neglect implementation of the cessation of hostilities agreement, or because we're Americans and we make an acronym out of everything, it's called COHA. So when Mike and I were in Addis in February, we asked the AU to convene a meeting of external partners of Ethiopia to talk about the funding that's required and the actions that are required. And Mike continues to work under the AU leadership to try and pursue implementation of COHA. All of you who care about Ethiopia, who have family and friends in Ethiopia, I also encourage you to push forward for implementation, and again, to address the underlying challenges and to make sure there's economic opportunity and reconstruction and rebuilding. So thank you very much for raising that point.
Okay, and we're going to end this with one last question from me, and that is the sustainability. We are in the middle of an election cycle. I'm so sorry. We're in the middle of an election cycle where there's a chance the administration can change. And so where you guys have been doing so much work in the African Bureau, especially with Nora, and how is that going to last if things were to change administration-wise?
What I can tell you is that President Biden said in December 2022, when he hosted African leaders from all over the continent, he said, I'm all in on Africa. And you've seen the work of his administration to engage in some of the ways I've discussed here today to support our African friends and our African partners. And that's the position of his administration, and I'm hopeful that position will carry forward. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We are ending it here and switching over. Mohamud, I believe, is going to say something now. Thank you, Mom.
Congratulations for your nomination. Congratulations for your DF nomination. Great senator. I'm saying.
Committee on Foreign Relations Chair.
That was a
ንላዕሊ ድምፁን ድሌቱን ዝንፀባረቐሉን ዘስምዐሉን ትካል ሚድያም ዘድልየሉ እዋን ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ እውን ምስ ካልኦት ተመሳሳሊ ዕላማ ሒዞም ዝንቀሳቐሱ ሚድያታት በመተባበር ድምፂ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኮይኑ ክቐፅልን ተበጻሕነቱ ይኾነ ትሕዝቱ ክሕይል ብደረጃ ኣመራርሒ ይኾነ ውዳድባም ሓደሽቲ ምንቅስቓሳት ጀሚሩሎም እዚ ዕላማ ንምዕዋት ድማ ዝተፈላለዩ ናይ ሞያ ተሓጋግዝትን ሰፊሕ ናይ ሓበሬታ ምንጭን ስለ ዘድሊ ኣብ ኩሎም ኩርናዓት ዓለም ዝርከቡ ተጋሩን ካልኦት ተገደስትን ብሞያን በመረዳእታን ኩሉ ዓይነት ሓገዝን ተሳትፎን ንኽትገብሩ ወይ ድማ በዝመረጽኩሞ ዓይነት ተበርክቶ ምሳና በሽርክና ይሆን በመተባበር ሓቢርኩምና ንክሰርሑ ንዕድማኩም ረብሓን ሕቶታትን ህዝቢ ትግራይ መሰረት ዝገበሩ ፖለቲካዊ ማሕበራውን ኢኮኖሚያውን ትሕዝቶታት ብመልክዕ ድራማ ቶክሾ ዶክመንታሪ ተሃድሶ ወዘተ ስሩዕ ግዛ የርሒዝኩም ብሽርክና ወይ ብፓርትነርሺፕ ሓቢርኩምና ክትሰርሑ ንትደልዩ ኣካላት ዝጠመኩም ኣገባብን ባይታን ማዕራሪና ኣለና ፈቅዶ ዓለም ኣብ ኣውሮፓ ኣሜሪካ ካናዳ ማእኸላይ ምብራቕ ቻይና ኣፍሪካ ላቲን ኣሜሪካን ኣውስትራልያን ናይ ትርከቡ ተጋሩን ተገደስትን ውልቃውን ማሕበራውን ምንቅስቓሳትን ውዕሎታትን መልኪትኩም ንትቡና ሓበሬታ ብምምስጋንን ብኸበሬታን ክንቅበለኩም ኢና ምንቲ እዚኦም ይኹን ካልኦት ሃነፅቲ ምትሕጋዛት በዘን ስዕባ ኣድራሻ ረኸቡና ዋና ቤት ጽሕፈት ሰሜን ኣሜሪካ ከተማ ዋሽንግተን ዲሲ ቁፅሪ ስልኪ 1-253-68-86-93 ኢሜይል tmhtvinfo@gmail.com ወይ ድማ tmhstudio@gmail.com ጨንፈር ቤት ጽሕፈት መቐለ ኣድራሻ ፊት ንፊት ዋና ቤት ጽሕፈት ባንኪ ንግዲ ኢትዮጵያ ዝርከብ መሞና ህንፃ መበል 11 ደብሪ ቢሮ ቁፅሪ 1126 ቁፅሪ ስልኪ 09-8 ወይ ድማ 09-14-03-962 ክትረኽቡና ትኽእሉ ኢኹም ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ TMH መፀዋዕታ ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ ኣብ ዝኾነ ይኹን ፀግዒ ፖለቲካን ሃይማኖትን ጉጅላዊ ፅዕንቶ ነፃ ዝኾነን ባህግን ድምፅን ህዝቢ ትግራይ ከስምዕ ብድጋፍ ህዝቢ ዝተጣሸን ዝቆመን ህዝባዊ ትካል ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ TMH በበምዕራፉ ዝገጠሞ ፈተንቲ መድረኻትና ተሳግረም ሕዝውን ድምፂ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኮይኑ ዝቕፅልሉ ሓዱሽ ምዕራፍ ይርከብ ዘለናዮ መድረኽ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ካብ ዝኾነ ግዜ ንላዕሊ ድምፁን ድሌቱን ዝንፀባረቐሉን ዘስምዐሉን ትካል ሚድያም ዘድልየሉ እዋን ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ እውን ምስ ካልኦት ተመሳሳሊ ዕላማ ሒዞም ዝንቀሳቐሱ ሚድያታት በመተባበር ድምፂ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኮይኑ ክቐፅልን ተበጻሕነቱ ይኾነ ትሕዝቱ ክሕይል ብደረጃ ኣመራርሒ ይኾነ ውዳድባም ሓደሽቲ ምንቅስቓሳት ጀሚሩሎም እዚ ዕላማ ንምዕዋት ድማ ዝተፈላለዩ ናይ ሞያ ተሓጋግዝትን ሰፊሕ ናይ ሓበሬታ ምንጭን ስለ ዘድሊ ኣብ ኩሎም ኩርናዓት ዓለም
who was such a big believer in global peace and foreign aid and my mentor, learned a lot from him. about what we need to make the world a better place. I'm so excited that we are hosting this 2024 East Africa Leadership Summit because we all know, as Tom just said, Africa is the future. And we know that. I don't think you'd guess that when you read all the headlines, right, of the news every day. There's many major challenging things going on around the world. We know they're all in our heads. But we also have to, while we deal with those crises, we also have to think about that future with Africa and about what's happening in some of the countries and how we have to be there to support these countries. I always think about a story that former President Clinton used to tell about how USAID had helped one of the African nations and had brought manufacturing to the nation, and he had gone on a tour of the factory, and he had gotten a shirt there, and he took that shirt and he put it in front of his closet so that every single time he opened his closet, he saw that shirt. And he thought, they don't hate us, they like us because we were there to help. And we have to think about this and remember that this is about peace in the world, and it's about, as been pointed out, thank you very much, Molly Fee, for your leadership. This is also about this incredible community in Minnesota and across the country, but it's also about the long haul. When you build friends and you reach out and you do the right thing, they are friends for a very long time, and it's good for us in our country. It's one of the arguments that we have to make for foreign aid, because sometimes there are, I'm trying to be nice about this right now, but there are forces against involvement in foreign relations. I think you know that. And people that think we can just shut our eyes and bury our heads in the sand and pretend these things aren't happening, well, they always come knocking at our own doors when we do that. And it's not the right thing to do for our economy or for our future. So I want to thank Mohamud Ismail, the Executive Director of the Minnesota Institute of Horn of Africa Studies, for greeting me and helping to put this together. I also know you heard from the Somali president, which I'm sure was an honor. I just want to tell you why Africa is so meaningful to me. The first is obvious, our community. I'm so proud of the staff that I have from East Africa. First, I see Beirut back there, who's back working for me again, which is really exciting. And then also Siad Ali, where are you? Right over here. Who, for our visitors from other places, is the first Somali American on the Minneapolis School Board, and served with much distinction in that role. But for me, he's been with me how many years, Siad? How many? 18. Why do you know? 18 years. 18 years. Siad has been there. 16 years. We don't want to exaggerate. We don't want to get a Pinocchio. But when I go into workplaces, sometimes I turn a corner and someone is there working from the community, and maybe sometimes they don't know English that well, or they don't know me, and all they do is they look at me and they say, Siad. So he has been an incredible leader in our office and for our state. Minnesota, as you know, has the largest Somali population in America, but we're also home to sizable populations from Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, Eritrea. And in fact, my dad, getting to my second reason I care so much, spent a lot of time in Africa when he died recently at age 93. But it was he was an adventurer, he liked to go places. But he got involved in microcredit, and he wrote a book called Barefoot Capitalism about Africa and his time, and some of it was Tanzania, some of it was Kenya. But the work that must be done to help people lift themselves up. I remember during one of my visits to Africa, meeting a woman who had her husband had died, and she had a small farm, and we had gone like an hour-and-a-half drive to get to meet her, and she grew just a small plot of teff. And she, through, I think it was the Gates Foundation, was a leader in the town for helping women get maternity care and make sure that they had sanitation and the like. And these senators are there, 5 women senators, and we're asking her these kind of senator-like questions, you know, well, how did you get this? How do you grow your crop? How do you do this? And she's explaining how she has to walk 2 hours every day for water. And then finally someone asked, and what's your biggest challenge? She says she walks 2 hours every day for water. And she said, challenge? I don't have challenges, I'm a leader. And she points to this organizational chart on the wall that showed her hut and that she was a leader in the community, and she showed the solar panels she got that helped her kids to be able to read. That's what I want to see more of from our country, investment in that kind of, because it's not just saving the world from disease, and it is not just making sure that people have as much as they need to make a livelihood, whether it's microcredit, whether it's farming, but it is also about that spirit that we need to convey. And you only show that spirit if you have people's back. I believe our state is stronger because of our East African immigrants and refugees. I have seen firsthand how you have strengthened our economy as business owners. You're saving lives as nurses and doctors. You're keeping our cities safe as firefighters and police officers, and you're shaping the next generation of teachers. So one of my favorite photos of my daughter is when she was in 6th grade, and she was in Tuttle School in Minneapolis. And her whole school, her whole class was made up of Hmong refugee kids and Somali refugee kids, mostly Somali refugee kids. And I want you to picture her. She was sort of small, this kid with these really tall Somali girls in the class photo. And when I look at that photo of her proudly standing with her class, it is a reminder to me, as those girls are now in their 20s and those boys are now in their 20s, of generation after generation of immigrants, and the strong belief that I have and will always have that immigrants don't diminish America, they are America. So what do we need to do? You just heard some of our policy challenges in that wonderful discussion, and I know you'll have more questions. I also saw your lunches out there, so I know the only thing between you and your lunches is me. So I'm going to make this brief, and I know Siad will stay on. We have some flooding in southern Minnesota that is really, really dangerous right now. It's getting worse today, so I'm going to have to go tend to that. But a stable East Africa is important for all of us. Chris Coons is one of my best friends in the Senate. I just texted him and told him I was coming here, as you know. He does a significant work on Africa. That is his passion. He is very close to President Biden. I had him come out here once to speak, and some of you were there. It was years ago when he first got to the Senate, and he was shocked at how many Minnesotans showed up. And I'm like, welcome to our state. First of all, I know that the Kenyan president's recent visit to Washington with President Biden and the dinner represented what is truly a historic step toward prosperity and stability in the region, and showed the priority that this administration places on Africa. We must continue to step up our diplomatic efforts in the Horn of Africa. We're working to ensure that we have people in place to move to work toward peace and democracy and prosperity. Minnesota's own Cynthia Kirst was just confirmed as the new ambassador to Djibouti. There was a hold put on her by some Republican, not like I ever have problems with this, even getting the Norwegian ambassador through. I had to once make 15 speeches about lutefisk, that is a true story, on the Senate floor because Ted Cruz had a hold on these Swedish and Norwegian ambassadors. I won. But the same thing with I literally had to call 3 different senators on the ambassador to Djibouti, and I'm very pleased we got that done. It shows that America cares when we have people in place. But we still know, despite our work in getting the ambassadors in place, bringing the leaders of these countries to America, doing all we can on foreign aid, we still know there are millions of East Africans living under the threat of political violence, from civil conflicts in Sudan and Ethiopia to militant activity to the insurgency in Somalia, and flooding. Droughts and famine have left millions without access to basic essentials like food, water, or a place to call home. That's why we need strong foreign aid programs now more than ever. USAID, under the very strong leadership of Ambassador Samantha Power, has provided significant funding in years past in response to natural disasters and food insecurity in East Africa. I remember one time I even got Tom Emmer, who's now number 3 in leadership in the House, to do a press conference with me at the American Refugee building on the need to make sure that we got U.S. foreign aid to Somalia. You can use our arguments about, as I just did, on food insecurity and the economy, but you also can make security, American security arguments that this is very important. And it is critical that we now redouble our efforts in the region. We took a step in the right direction under the national security package that Congress passed earlier this year, which included significant funding for the international disaster assistance, but as you all know, much more needs to be done. Chris just worked around the clock. There were many of us that said that we would not support that package without including humanitarian aid, and I was one of them. So we have to keep having leaders who are willing to stand up for the aid that we is so important. After years of drought, which has been a major challenge, more than 23 million people across East Africa face severe hunger, and 50 million people across the region are being pushed towards starvation. That's why we must ensure America continues to be the world's largest donor of humanitarian food assistance. Critical to that effort is maintaining strong funding for the McGovern-Dole Food for Education and Food for Peace programs, which are part of the Farm Bill. And guess who's going to be chairing the Agriculture Committee next year? Looking at her. So this is one of my top priorities as a senior member of the Ag Committee. I worked to make sure the last Farm Bill funded these programs, and I am fighting to protect them in this next bill, which I actually hope we get done this summer, this year, before I take over. That'll allow us to focus more deeply on some of the other issues we have, and that would be the best for this aid, that we get it done right away, but we stand ready to go. Together, McGovern-Dole and Food for Peace have given children and families in East Africa and across the globe a new lease on life. For example, the McGovern-Dole program recently funded a project in Madagascar, I went there once, which provides meals to students. During its first week alone, the program served more than 12,000 meals to students in 18 schools. In the coming years, the program will expand to 130 schools. This assistance saves lives. And during a time when East African nations are torn apart by conflict and natural disasters, it could not be more critical. So we must continue pushing that. We must continue telling that story of the shirt in the closet. We must continue talking about the community in here and how much it means to our economy and how much it means to our nation's economy. That's how we continue to make the case. Security for our nation, economy, and economic future for our people for foreign aid. We take serving others seriously in our state, and our East African families are living proof of that. They've been here to improve lives, their own and their neighbors. I will never forget joining a group of volunteers at a hunger relief organization, spending the day with my daughter, who was very short at the time, measuring our grain in coffee cups. But the thing that I most remember about that day was all the Somali families that were there to help, that were there doing the same thing to help the people at home. That grain was going abroad. On a typical Saturday, they might have been out having a fun day in the park, or going shopping, or going to our great Somali mall not too far away. But they were there standing shoulder to shoulder with their moms and dads, measuring out grain and packing meals and saving the lives of children that they've never met. By being at this summit, you're doing that too. The discussions you have today will bring us closer to peace and stability in East Africa and prosperity for East Africans across the globe. Thank you, and enjoy your day. Thank you very much.
መፀዋዕታ ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ ዝኾነ ይኹን ፀግዒ ፖለቲካን ሃይማኖትን ጉጅላዊ ፅዕንቶ ነፃ ዝኾነን ባህግን ድምፅን ህዝቢ ትግራይ ከስምዕ ብድጋፍ ህዝቢ ዝተጣሸን ዝቆመን ህዝባዊ ትካል ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ TMH በምዕራፉ ዝገጠሞ ፈተንቲ መድረኻት እናተሳግረም ህዝብን ድምፂ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኮይኑ ዝቕፅልሉ ሓዱሽ ምዕራፍ ይርከብ ዘለናዮ መድረኽ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ካብ ዝኾነ ግዜ ንላዕሊ ድምፁን ድሌቱን ዝንፀባረቐሉን ዘስምዐሉን ትካል ሚድያም ዘድልየሉ እዋን ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ እውን ምስ ካልኦት ተመሳሳሊ ዕላማ ሒዞም ዝንቀሳቐሱ ሚድያታት በመተባበር ድምፂ ህዝቢ ትግራይ ኮይኑ ክቕፅልን ተበፃሕነቱ ይኹን ትሕዝቱ ክሕይል ብደረጃ ኣመራርሓ ይኹን ውዳድባም ሓደሽቲ ምንቅስቓሳት ጀሚሩሎም እዚ ዕላማ ንምዕዋት ድማ ዝተፈላለዩ ናይ ሞያ ተሓጋግዝትን ሰፊሕ ናይ ሓበሬታ ምንጭን ስለ ዘድሊ ኣብ ኩሎም ኩርናዓት ዓለም ዝርከቡ ተጋሩን ካልኦት ተገደስትን ብሞያን በመረዳእታን ኩሉ ዓይነት ሓገዝን ተሳትፎን ንኽትገብሩ ወይ ድማ ብዝመረፅኩሞ ዓይነት ኣበርክቶ ምሳና ብሽርክና ይኹን ብምትሕባር ሓቢርኩምና ንክትሰርሑ ንዕድማኩም ረብሓን ሕቶታትን ህዝቢ ትግራይ መሰረት ዝገበሩ ፖለቲካዊ ማሕበራውን ኢኮኖሚያውን ትሕዝቶታት ብመልክዕ ድራማ ቶክሾ ዶክመንታሪ ተሃድሶ ወዘተ ስሩዕ ግዛ የርሒዝኩም ብሽርክና ወይ ብፓርትነርሺፕ ሓቢርኩምና ክትሰርሑን ትደልዩ ኣካላት ዝጠመኩም ኣገባብን ባይታን መዕራሪና ኣለና ፈቅዶ ዓለም ኣብ ኣውሮፓ ኣሜሪካ ካናዳ ማእኸላይ ምብራቕ ቻይና ኣፍሪካ ላቲን ኣሜሪካን ኣውስትራልያን ናይ ትርከቡ ተጋሩን ተገደስትን ውልቃውን ማሕበራውን ምንቅስቓሳትን ውዕሎታትን መልኪትኩም ንትብና ሓበሬታም ብምምስጋንን ብኸበሬታን ክንቅበለኩም ኢና ምንቲ እዚኦም ይኹን ካልኦት ሃነፅቲ ምትሕጋዛት በዘን ስዕባ ኣድራሻ ረኸቡና ዋና ቤት ጽሕፈት ሰሜን ኣሜሪካ ከተማ ዋሽንግተን ዲሲ ቁፅሪ ስልኪ 1-253-368-86-93 ኢሜይል tmhtvinfo@gmail.com ወይ ድማ tmhstudio@gmail.com ጨንፈር ቤት ጽሕፈት መቐለ ኣድራሻ ፊት ንፊት ዋና ቤት ጽሕፈት ባንኪ ንግዲ ኢትዮጵያ ዝርከብ መሞና ህንፃ መበል 11 ደብሪ ቢሮ ቁፅሪ 1106 ቁፅሪ ስልኪ 09-8 ወይ ድማ 09-14-03-962 ክትረኽቡና ትኽእሉ ኢኹም ትግራይ ሚድያ ሃውስ TMH